His car was idling, blinkers on, angled just enough into the fire lane that I knew it would bother someone soon. I saw him before he saw me, standing beside the car, one hand in his pocket, the other shielding his eyes from the sun. Farmer's market bags already in the back seat. Classic. Always early, always tidy, always waiting for me like I was a guest in a life he had organized to the hour. I was still holding the bundle of kale when I reached the car. The moment I opened the door, I felt it, that slight hitch in his breath. The pause. "You texted me last night," he said, not looking up from the phone in his hand. "Said you were going to bed early." I blinked, my body tensed, the way it does when you realize your lie wasn't small after all. Then he turned the screen to me. One name, one message, a single mistake, one I had meant to send to someone else. I hadn't even noticed it went to him. I froze. He knew. Still, I kept my face blank, my tone light. "Stop acting like you own me. You don't get a say in who I see." It slipped out colder than I meant. Or maybe I meant it exactly like that. Either way, it landed. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I felt something in him go still. Like the last tick of a clock before it dies. "You're right," he said quietly. "We're not married." Then he got in the car and drove off. Just like that. If you're still listening and any of this feels uncomfortably familiar, hit like and subscribe. Most people just listen in silence, but that one click tells the team these stories matter. I stood there, dumbly, clutching the bunch of kale like it might explain anything. I looked down at the green leaves, the rubber band cutting into my wrist, and then glanced around. A mother passed by with a toddler in tow. A college kid was haggling over peaches. Nothing had changed out here, but something seismic had split beneath me. I called his name once, not loud, not really expecting him to turn around, but he didn't. And suddenly I was left in the parking lot with 2 paper bags, a dumb smile still halfway on my face, and a line echoing in my head that I couldn't take back. "You don't get a say in who I see." I hadn't even meant to go that far. I just didn't want to be cornered, to be made to explain. We hadn't been right in months, maybe longer, but this wasn't how it was supposed to start unraveling. I thought I'd get to pace it, frame it, control the narrative. Instead, the man who always asked if I needed anything before he locked the front door didn't ask me anything at all. He just left. I stood there long enough for someone to ask if I needed help. I mumbled something about my ride being delayed and walked back toward my car. My hands were shaking, but I told myself it was just the cold, or the shock, or maybe because for the first time I wasn't sure if I was going home or if I'd already lost it. I checked my phone, reread the message I'd sent by mistake. "He's getting suspicious. We'll tell you more tomorrow. Miss you." There was no denying it now. I had blown it. The text wasn't vague, wasn't friendly. It was betrayal typed in plain English, delivered to the one person who had never once made me feel like I had to lie. I sat in my car, door shut, engine off, and stared through the windshield. I didn't even cry, not at first. I just sat there, thinking about the way he'd looked at me when he said we weren't married. Not angry, not heartbroken, just done. And that was the part I didn't know how to fix. I didn't go home. I drove past the left turn that led to our street, past the familiar gas station where I always filled up before Sunday errands, past the quiet park where we used to sit on warm evenings and pretend we had more time than we did. I kept driving, window cracked just enough to let in the cold morning air until I reached the cafe on Willow and Ninth. Veronica was already inside, sitting at a small round table by the window, typing something into her laptop. She looked up when I walked in and closed it with a soft click. She didn't smile. Not really. Just nodded. "You look calm." I set the slim gray folder between us, leaned back in my chair, and said, "I'd like the locks changed by Monday." She didn't open the folder right away, just rested her fingers on it, watching me for a moment like a doctor waiting to see if the patient will flinch. "What's inside?" she asked. "Post-nup Rachel signed when we refinanced. Forgot about it." I tapped the folder. She gave up all claim to the house in exchange for cash liquidity. Her startup, remember? Veronica nodded once, slowly. That was clever. Also in there, screenshots of texts. The one from last night, the ones before. She flipped the folder open, scanned the first few pages, raised an eyebrow. You were documenting her for months? I sipped my coffee. It was bitter, too hot, but I welcomed the burn. I was preparing. Veronica turned another page, paused. You bought out the house last fall. Quietly, right after she asked to move the deed into my name to simplify things for the bank. She never read the amendment. Her lips pressed into a thin line. A hint of admiration flickered behind her glasses. She's going to contest. She can try, I said, but her name's not on anything, and she left voluntarily. Check the dates. She closed the folder. Okay, locks? I have a locksmith lined up. He'll meet me tomorrow. New code, new keys, and her things. I didn't hesitate. On the lawn, boxed, neat, tarp if it rains. Veronica leaned back, exhaled. You're sure? I was sure the moment she said I didn't get a say. I stared into the steam rising from the cup. She was right, I don't, not in her choices, but I get full say over the ones that affect my home. A silence settled between us, thick, heavy, but not uncomfortable. She nodded again, then reached into her bag and pulled out a smaller envelope. This is the letter she'll receive if she contacts me directly. It lays out the property division based on the postnup. No alimony, no equity, no access. I took it, turned it over once in my hands, then tucked it into my coat pocket. Perfect. She hesitated. There's still time to wait. Cool off. Talk. She made it clear there's nothing left to talk about. Veronica nodded slowly, then tapped the side of her mug. Most men don't plan like this. They react. You didn't flinch. I flinched, I said. I just did it in silence. Outside, a wind picked up. Leaves scraped across the sidewalk. Inside, the cafe was quiet, except for the low hum of the espresso machine and a couple laughing softly in the corner. I looked at them briefly, then turned back to Veronica. This part, the legal part, it's just cleanup now, I said. The marriage ended in a parking lot. And she doesn't know, Veronica said, that you already closed every door she thought she could walk back through. I didn't respond, just folded my hands and waited. We had more to plan. Friday, 2:17 p.m. My phone buzzed once. Rachel's name lit up the screen. No greeting, no context. Taking a break, don't call. 10 seconds later, a photo came through. Her hair up in a towel, shoulders bare in a white hotel robe, holding a glass of red against low-lit curtains and muted gold fixtures, the kind of place that charges for bottled water and writes the Wi-Fi password in cursive on a welcome card. I zoomed in. Not our towels, not our room, not our wine. I didn't reply. Across town, Veronica's private investigator had already checked in. His update arrived before sunset. Efficient, clinical. Hotel name, reservation confirmation. Check-in at 12:41 p.m. 2 guests, 1 male, 1 female. Paid on her card. At 8:36 p.m., a photo. Rachel at the rooftop bar, laughing, not posed, not filtered. Her eyes were half closed, the way they get when she's deep into that second drink. Next to her, a man in a navy blazer, leaning in just enough. Elbow brushed hers, comfort that only comes with time. Room service receipt came through around midnight. Tag 3387, charcuterie board, 2 desserts, and a bottle of Amarone. She knew I was allergic to red wine, specifically Amarone. She used to scan menus for me, warn waiters, correct sommeliers. I put the receipt down without flinching. Didn't need to dramatize it. It was just confirmation. Saturday morning, I walked the property. Not for nostalgia, not even for closure. I walked to measure the quiet. I noted the creak in the front gate, the low groan of the garage door motor, the cracked tile by the planter she never liked, all of it now mine, signed, filed, notarized. By noon, I had everything I needed, time-stamped evidence, legal clearance, and a locksmith scheduled for Sunday morning. I deleted her text, not out of anger, out of efficiency. Rachel had always been a believer in clean breaks. She said it once after our first real fight, if we ever fall apart, I won't make it messy. I'll just go. She wasn't lying. She went. She took her robe and her wine and her hotel lighting and made it look easy, but she forgot the part where actions echo. She thought she had space now, freedom, new air to breathe, and maybe she did. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, is that while she uncorked her Friday night, The structure beneath her had already shifted. The locks she once turned without thought wouldn't answer to her code. The bedroom she lit with candles was no longer hers to re-enter. The house knew. The law knew. And soon, she'd know too. I printed the photos. 3 copies. 1 for the file, 1 for the envelope. 1 for me, not to keep, but to remember how much silence can hold before it hardens. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't drama. This was architecture. Weight-bearing, measured, final. The locksmith pulled into the driveway at 8:03 a.m., a minute early, van humming as he parked beneath the sycamore tree. Rachel once insisted we trim every spring. He stepped out, toolbox in hand, glancing briefly at the house like he'd seen this setup before. A clean lawn, closed blinds, and a man standing at the threshold with too little expression and too much clarity. "Front and back?" he asked. "All external doors," I said, "and I'll need the garage reprogrammed. She has a clicker." He nodded. "Shouldn't take long." By 9:12, the front lock clinked free in his gloved hands. By 10:30, the last door clicked into its new pattern. I walked him through the alarm panel, gave him the 4-digit code I'd chosen that morning. Nothing sentimental, nothing guessable. He showed me how to wipe all previous entries from the system, no traces left. When he left, I stood inside the doorway for a full minute, holding the new keys. 3 copies. 1 for me, 1 in the fire safe, 1 for Veronica. The air in the house felt different, not emptier, just accurate, as if the walls had been holding their breath and now finally exhaled. Upstairs, I had already started. Rachel's closet was half cleared. I finished the rest in under 2 hours. Everything she owned was folded or wrapped, sorted by drawer, by season, by memory. Labels in clean black marker: closet, tops, bathroom, makeup, nightstand, misc. Nothing torn, nothing tossed. Even the items I'd bought for her, necklaces, a silk scarf from our anniversary trip, the robe she wore in the selfie, I packed those too. This wasn't petty. It was precision. I didn't box the framed photos. I left those in a separate bag. Photos lie. I didn't want them in my house anymore. At 11:48 a.m., I stretched a blue tarp across the side patio. If the weather turned, her things would stay dry. I stacked the boxes by type, weighed them down with bricks. Everything she'd need was there, just not the life she'd left behind. Steve was trimming hedges when I walked next door, mid-70s, a retired contractor, sharp eyes, and a memory like a ledger. He shut off the trimmer when he saw me. "You all right?" he asked. "Getting there," I said. "I've got to be out for the afternoon. If she comes back while I'm gone," he raised an eyebrow. "Just tell her," I continued, "your ex-husband left this for you." Steve's mouth twitched. Cold. I looked at him. Calm. Clean. He nodded once, serious now. "She won't get past me." We stood there in silence for a few seconds, the kind men share when there's too much to say and no need to say it. Then I walked back, stepped through the front door, and locked it with the new key. The click echoed. Inside, the house was still, not quiet from absence, but reset. On the kitchen table sat a manila envelope addressed to Rachel. Inside, a copy of the post-nup, a typed list of the boxed items, Veronica's card paper clipped to the top. I made one last pass through the rooms, straightened the towels, closed the hallway closet, lowered the thermostat. By noon, everything was in motion. She'd asked for space. She just never expected the silence that came with it. The sky was already shifting to that strange in-between color, dusk with the last pink smudges fading into slate. Rachel's headlights swept across the driveway, illuminating the front hedge and a neat row of boxes lined up by the patio wall. She slowed, blinked once, then pulled in tight to the house, the way she always did when she wanted to unload quickly and disappear inside. The engine cut off, the click of the car door, then the familiar wheeled suitcase rumbling softly across the concrete. She wore the same hoodie she used to borrow from me, sleeves rolled to her elbows, casual, effortless. She was probably rehearsing some version of Control in her head, how to ease back in, frame things as a miscommunication, maybe even blame me for overreacting. She climbed the steps slowly, probably already annoyed that the porch light was on. I'd always left it off when she stayed away late, but it burned tonight, bright, deliberate. She punched in the code, denied. She frowned, tried again, denied. The beep echoed sharper the second time. Her eyes narrowed. She gripped the handle and turned it with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from years of knowing a door would always open. It didn't. Her head tilted slightly. One hand went to her phone. No new messages, no missed calls. Just the screen reflecting back at her in the porch light, a stillness that hadn't existed before. Then she saw it, taped to the glass with painter's tape, centered above the handle in plain typed font. Legal access revoked. Please contact counsel. The paper didn't flutter. There was no wind, just her breathing, quickening now, and the distant sound of someone mowing a lawn 2 streets over. She stepped back, turned in a slow circle, probably hoping she'd miss something. A car parked down the street, a shadow behind the blinds. Any sign of me? Then her eyes landed on Steve's porch. He'd been sitting there for 20 minutes, newspaper folded on his lap, bourbon in a glass, waiting in the exact way I'd asked him to. Nothing about him moved as she walked over. No smile, no greeting, just the weight of a man who'd already seen what was coming. "Steve," she started. He stood, walked to the edge of the steps. Then evenly, like it was weather he was reporting, "Your ex-husband said to leave your key." Rachel didn't speak, just stared. He nodded once, finished his bourbon, and sat back down. Behind her, the suitcase still sat on the porch, half in shadow. The wheels glinted, the boxes by the wall were untouched, arranged with quiet precision, her whole life distilled into labeled cardboard. She turned back to the door again, reread the note, tried the handle once more, slower this time, as if maybe gentleness would change the result. It didn't. Then her shoulders dropped. Slightly, not defeat, not yet, but a crack, a fracture in the posture. Her head bowed just enough to make it real. Rachel had always been good at control, but not this kind, not the kind that doesn't wait for her to shape it, not the kind that doesn't answer when she knocks. And for the first time, it seemed to dawn on her. This wasn't a fight. This was aftermath. The door stayed closed, the light stayed on, and Steve just turned the page of his newspaper. The first call came at 8:04 p.m. Missed, no voicemail, then 2 more, minutes apart, one from her number, one from no caller ID, like I wouldn't know it was still her, trying a different angle. I watched them blink across the screen while I stood by the stove boiling water for tea. The same kettle she once teased me about, said it looked like a camping relic. Now it sounded like punctuation. 3 missed calls, then the text started. "Seriously? Answer me. We need to talk." I didn't respond, just set the phone down, face down on the counter, and walked away. The silence between her messages filled the room like a storm front waiting to break. 6 texts in under 20 minutes. The last one a shift in tone. "You're being ridiculous. We need to talk." I forwarded everything to Veronica and left the phone off for a while. She replied within the hour. No drama, no emotion, just the sharp edge of finality in writing. All communication must now go through counsel. Property division is complete. No items of joint ownership remain. Further contact may be considered harassment. I left it at that. No answers, no invitations. When I turned the phone back on later, the messages kept coming, but slower now. The rhythm changed. Not angry, not bold, just uncertain. Look, I didn't mean it like that. It was a lot. I felt cornered. I was overwhelmed. A long pause, then, "Please don't do this." But I didn't read the rest. I just tapped mark as read without opening the thread. She was trying to rewind a film that had already been scored, cut, and archived, and in that attempt, she revealed something I'd always quietly feared but never confirmed. She had no idea what permanence looked like until it stared her in the face. This wasn't spite, it wasn't revenge, it was structure. She thought I was just cooling off, that the house was still her home with a bruised lock on the front door. She didn't understand that there was no pause button here, only a playhead that had already passed the final scene. And once you see that scene, once you watch yourself from the outside, suitcase in hand, being told by a neighbor that your ex-husband said to leave the key, there's no illusion left. Her words shifted from fire to fog. No more declarations, no more chest-out confidence. Just fog, trying to seep under doors that no longer existed. She would keep messaging for a while. People like Rachel don't stop quickly. They don't know how to end something they didn't control. But the story was already written, the ink already dry, and I didn't need to read the rest to know how her sentences would end. Monday morning started with a soft buzz from my phone and the quiet hiss of the coffee maker. No alarms, no pounding on the door, just one missed call from an unfamiliar number, out of state, then a voicemail that began with her sister's voice, breathless, already angry. She showed up crying. "What the hell happened? She says you locked her out and humiliated her. Is this true?" I listened to the message once. No panic, no emotion, just the clinical recognition of a move she didn't expect me to make. I didn't call back. I didn't explain. I just opened my email, attached 2 files, one PDF of the hotel invoice with her name, room number, and check-in timestamp. The other, Veronica's letter outlining the legal termination of shared property. No commentary, no signature. I clicked send. 3 minutes later, my phone rang again. Same number. I ignored it. At 10:12 a.m., another email came in, this one from Rachel's work account, not her, her boss. Subject, quick check-in. The body was short, polite, but curious. "Hi, just touching base. Rachel mentioned you two were working through some things and might be moving, so she asked me to list her emergency contact as her father again. Can you confirm?" I stared at it for a few seconds. I could hear her voice in the wording, just figuring things out. Like this was some temporary misstep, something that could be revised, reframed, like the house she couldn't enter, the keys she no longer held, the silence that greeted her messages were just a rough patch. I replied with a simple line, "Please see attached." I BCC'd Veronica and attached the updated HR form from last year, the one where I had changed the emergency contact after she'd missed 2 appointments and left 3 unanswered messages during a supposed business trip that turned out to be anything but. At the bottom of the form, primary contact, self, secondary, none. No elaboration, no passive aggression, just data. Facts do what emotions can't. They stand, unmoved, irrefutable. I didn't hear back from the boss, didn't need to, but I saw the ripple begin to spread. Her Instagram went silent. The stories, usually full of matcha foam and sunset angles, vanished. Her sister unfollowed me. Mutual friends, once warm and chatty, now sent nothing but occasional likes to old posts, the digital equivalent of looking down at your shoes when someone walks by in a hallway. By lunch, 3 people I hadn't heard from in months sent messages that began with variations of, "Hey, I heard," but I didn't open those either. This wasn't gossip. This was gravity. And Rachel was learning the hard way that truth moves quietly, but lands like iron. She'd built a narrative, one hint at a time, small rewrites in conversations, suggestions that I was distant, difficult, maybe even controlling. Half-truths handed out in soft tones, always leaving space for plausible deniability. But now, the curtain had shifted, and behind it, receipts, timestamps. A man who said nothing but signed everything. She expected noise. She expected a confrontation, a scene, a back and forth she could spin or soften. Instead, she got an inbox full of silence. And silence, used right, can be louder than anything she was ready for. It happened on a Wednesday late afternoon. She was home, or wherever she now stayed, and the knock at the door must have caught her mid-scroll, mid-denial, mid-sentence about how it was all just a misunderstanding. The process server said her name, handed her the manila envelope. Standard delivery, standard tone, no drama, no kindness either, just the precision of someone doing a job. Inside, neatly organized, clause 6C of the postnup, her own signature below it, stated plainly that proven infidelity would nullify any claim to the residence. Next, a printed email exchange from 2 years ago, her request to expedite the refinance. Her acknowledgement in writing that she'd happily remove her name from the deed if it means getting it done faster. A smiley face at the end of the line. I remember that email. I remember thinking then, she trusted me completely, and then the final sheet, a full inventory of all her belongings returned in labeled boxes, signed, dated, time-stamped photos included. I hadn't left room for her to claim anything was missing. Tucked inside the folder, on a pale blue sticky note in Veronica's crisp handwriting, all finalized, no rights to contest. I imagined her fingers pausing there, pressing that note just a little too long, Imagine the flutter in her chest, not because she didn't see it coming, but because the finality finally landed. This was no pause, no moment of reflection before a dramatic apology. This wasn't a cooling off period. This was the end, penned and papered in legal clarity. I didn't hear from her right away, but just before midnight, a single message came through. Did you ever love me? No punctuation, no warmth, no begging, just the question. It sat on my screen like a ghost, heavy in its simplicity, a last desperate reach backward toward something I had once given freely, fully, stupidly. The kind of love that builds houses and learns allergy menus and checks locks twice before bed. The kind that forgives small absences and waits up for late returns. The kind she traded in for hotel robes and quiet cover stories. I didn't reply. That answer belonged to the man she erased, the one she spoke to like a footnote in his own life, the one she told in public and with a scoff that he didn't get a say, and now she didn't either. I left the message unread, not because it didn't matter, but because it mattered too much to drag through the mud of what came after. The paperwork was done. The silence was permanent, not vengeance, just completion. The invitation came midweek, polite and practiced. Rachel's mother called first, then her father followed with an email, short, formal, offering a seat at their table that Friday. We believe this deserves a proper conversation, he wrote, as if civility could rewind the past month. I responded in kind, clear, courteous, final. I appreciate the offer, but I won't be attending. There was no counter-invite, no plea for understanding, just silence after that. And I knew they'd fill it however they needed to. Sighs over wine, old stories retold with edits, glances between each other that asked the question neither wanted to say out loud. Still, I prepared for the night. Not for the dinner, but for what would inevitably come. I slipped a letter into a manila envelope, folded neatly alongside two documents. The final signed settlement and a notarized list of all assets transferred, each line checked and initialed. No gaps, no debate. The letter on top wasn't long, just a few sentences addressed to her father in clean centered print. Your daughter once told me I didn't get a say. This is me exercising my silence. D. I dropped it off with Steve early that evening. We stood at his fence as the sun dipped low behind the rooftops. I handed it over without a word. She might come by, I said. He nodded, thumbed the edge of the envelope. I'll give it to her. Only if she waits. Steve looked at me, and for once didn't joke. She always thought the clock would pause for her. I said nothing, just stepped back, nodded once, and left. By 6:20 p.m., she was there, alone, not in the car with her parents, not with backup, not with excuses lined up like pearls, just her, parked across the street. She sat behind the wheel for a long while before getting out, brushing invisible lint off her sleeve, pacing once in front of the porch like she wasn't sure how to knock anymore. Steve saw her from his chair. He didn't move. She sat on the porch steps, no coat, just crossed arms and nervous glances toward the driveway. Maybe she thought I'd appear. Maybe she thought someone, her mother, her father, even Steve, would walk out and tell her what the next line was supposed to be. But no one did. By 7:15, she was still there, phone untouched, eyes darting every time a car passed. At 8:03, Steve rose. He walked across the lawn without a word and held out the envelope. She stared at it. Didn't take it right away, just looked at the seal like it might open itself if she waited long enough. This from him? She asked, barely above a whisper. Steve didn't nod, didn't shrug, just said, he said to give it to you if you stayed. And then he walked back to his porch and sat down, as if nothing had happened at all. She opened the envelope on the steps, fingers trembling slightly as she unfolded the letter. Her eyes scanned the page, once then again, and I wondered if she'd hear my voice in the words, or just the echo of the door she'd slammed too many times to realize it might one day stay closed. She folded the paper back up slowly, no tears, no shouting, just that stunned quiet when the noise finally runs out and you're left with what you built, alone. She stayed another hour. Maybe she was waiting for someone to come explain it all for her, but no one came, and nothing moved. The leaves started changing before I noticed her car was gone for good. 2 weeks, maybe 3, and then one morning the driveway next door was just an empty slab of concrete. The porch light never came on. No door slams, no suitcase wheels, no Rachel. Steve mentioned it first in passing while I was mowing the front lawn. She moved in with her sister, he said, squinting down the street. North side, smaller house, no yard to speak of. I didn't stop pushing the mower, just nodded. The hedges were already trimmed tight, mulch fresh, walkway swept. The place looked cleaner than it had in years, like it had finally decided to be a home instead of a stage. She thought you'd chase her, Steve added after a beat. I let go of the mower handle. The engine coughed out and died. I looked at the light I'd installed over the porch last week. Motion sensor, quiet, warm-toned. I looked at the new blinds, the painted trim, the silence that no longer pressed in like a question. She was wrong, I said. He didn't reply. He didn't have to. Some things don't require a second voice. Inside, the air had taken on the post-summer stillness. Cool mornings, distant school bells, a breeze that sometimes felt like memory. I passed through the rooms without checking over my shoulder. No more subtle glances to see if a bag was left by the door, if a charger cord had reappeared, if her coat hung where it shouldn't be. That instinct was gone now, burned out like a bulb you don't bother replacing. In the drawer by the desk where I kept the filed paperwork, insurance, utilities, property tax receipts, one folder sat by itself. Property transfer, final. Stapled at the top, the deed in my name, finalized, sealed, taped to the back, untouched, her wedding ring. I hadn't known where else to put it, couldn't throw it out, couldn't pawn it. It wasn't mine to sell or hers to reclaim. It simply existed, like an echo of something once said, now too old to take back. Every now and then I'd open the drawer and look at it, not out of grief, not regret, just recognition. You don't erase a marriage, you outgrow it. I never heard from her again. No more messages, no attempts to rewrite the ending, just a silence that eventually stopped feeling like absence and started feeling like air. Sometimes, at night, the porch light flicks on when the wind stirs the hedges or when Steve's cat wanders too close. I leave it on, let it reset itself. Rachel's gone. But what remains, what I chose to keep, is mine, not because I fought for it, but because I stopped letting someone else decide when the story was over.